Hi, hello, welcome back. My name is Megan, and today we're talking about all the books that I read in February and March. Let's get right into it. So I'm going to try to talk about all of these books rather briefly because we do have a lot of books to get through. And actually, the books that I'm most excited to talk about are a part of a vlog that I'm making that I'm almost done with. So I'm hoping it will be out just like a week after this video is out. So I'm gonna try to keep all my like rambling thoughts and more in-depth reviews for that video. But I'm still trying to get like a vibe on how often to do these wrap-ups. I know some booktubers do it every month, some every 2 months, some like every quarter or just when they feel like it. I feel like every 2 months might be a better schedule for me, just with the amount of time that I have to actually sit down and make these videos, and for like the amount of books that I read in a month. I feel like it just makes more sense. I don't know, we'll see. Regardless, I have 2 months worth of books to talk about today. So we're gonna start off with the first book that I finished in February, Department of Speculation by Jenny Offill. Now this book is one of the ones that will be in the vlog that's coming up, so I'm gonna very briefly talk about this book. It's a library book, so I have to use like the removable tabs, but you can see how much tabbing I did on it. I really loved this book. Really loved this tiny little book. It's like 175 pages. It's not written in like a traditional way. It's like more just like little thoughts and musings and quotes from poetry and like philosophers and like random facts and just like, I don't know, it's got a very interesting format. There is like an overarching narrative that is happening within this, but you're mainly just getting kind of a point of view of the main character, who in the book is just referred to as the wife. She's never named, but it's just kind of her thoughts as she's moving through life. We start with her like early marriage to her husband. They have a baby. You go through like that season of new motherhood, postpartum, having a young child, what that does to your marriage and career and life and your identity. And then there's kind of a falling out with the husband, so to speak, and so how they navigate that in their marriage. Like that's kind of the scope of what's happening, but within that you're just kind of getting little snippets of things and observations. I don't know, it's very hard to explain. I would read a whole series of books written in this format. I loved this format. It really worked for me for whatever reason. I feel like the more like minimal writing style like really gave the book a lot of room to breathe, and like ended up being a very like emotionally expansive book for me. I related a lot to the main character. I saw myself in her in many ways, whether like directly or indirectly with what was happening in her life. But the book essentially is just a really compelling analysis of what a long-term relationship and marriage is like through the various ups and downs of life. And what a woman is called to sacrifice for the sake of like domesticity. And there was some really interesting things. I've seen people say, like when I was trying to look up reviews and what people thought about this book, I've seen people say that they reread this book very often, and I can definitely see like wanting to reread this book like once every year or two. I feel like it's one of those books that you'll get more and more out of the more you like let it sit with you. I gave this book 4 stars. Now that I'm like looking at my review, I feel like I could honestly bump it up to 4.5. I really loved this book, but I really enjoyed this book, and I do highly recommend it. I had my husband read it and he even really loved it, so you have 2 people recommending it to you right now. If it sounds interesting to you at all, I definitely say go read it. Okay, I'm stepping out of order a little bit for like the order that I finished these books in, because I want to keep the positive train going and talk about another book that I really loved, and that was Northwoods by Daniel Mason. Again, this is another book that's going to be in the vlog coming up, so you're getting kind of a spoiler about how I felt about all the books that I read for that vlog. This was 5 stars, a 5-star book for me. I'm pretty sure my first 5-star of the year, if I'm not mistaken. But this book, essentially, it's kind of hard to describe. I would say the main character of this book is actually a house or a piece of land, that we follow all of the inhabitants of this area over centuries, like from Puritan colony up to present day. This little like plot of land, this house that was built there in the woods in Massachusetts. And you get a lot of really interesting like playing with format in this book. There are photos and like little clips of like artworks. There's songs and poetry, there's letters. This one is just a couple pages of like footnotes. But yeah, some really interesting formatting things going on. Even though our time with each individual character or family in this book is brief because of like the scope of the book, I feel like the author did an amazing job at really letting us get to know the character in a very intimate way. And they kind of reappear and reintroduce themselves throughout the book. So there's some really interesting callbacks going on that I think would make this book really fun to reread in the future. And I am putting this on my list of books that I would like to reread in the future. Yeah, I loved this book. It was so beautiful, it was so interesting, it was so compelling. If it sounds good to you at all, I highly, highly recommend it. 5 stars, loved this book. All right, now sadly we're bringing it down a little bit, and the book that I'm about to talk about is very beloved. A lot of people really, really love this book. I am for sure the outlying opinion on this book. 7 Days in June by Tia Williams. I am so sad to say that I did not like this book. I know that I am very much in the minority opinion on this, so please take everything I'm saying with a grain of salt here. But it just really, really did not work for me. It's a romance novel. If you're unfamiliar with the book, it's a romance novel. It centers 2 Black characters that had a very tumultuous week together as like 17 or 18-year-olds. They were still in high school. And then like 15 years later, in their 30s, they find each other again. They're both very successful authors. She writes vampire erotica, like a big like 15-book series, ongoing series. And he writes like very serious, highbrow, like literary fiction. And they end up meeting back up as adults and kind of picking up where they left off in a way. And that's the basic of the story. And obviously it's a romance, so that is really the core of the book, but there's a lot of other things going on here, or a lot of other things that the author is attempting to have go on here. But really the heart of why this book did not vibe for me is I just did not find it romantic at all. Their time spent as teenagers together was so sad to me. Like, it was not romantic. It was just trauma upon trauma, drug-induced haze of a week together. They were both high and drunk the whole time. There's other things going on. They're both very messed up, very traumatized children that all of the adults in their lives, the system has failed them, and they get together and like become like immediately weirdly codependent on each other and then split after a week. And I'm not gonna say like why, because obviously it would spoil some plot points, but they don't see each other again until they're in their 30s, like I said. And sure, they've worked through some things on the surface, right? Like Shane, the male main character, he was an alcoholic. He became an alcoholic. He went through AA. He got sober. She has like removed herself from her toxic environment, like with her mother as a child, and she's created a very successful life for her and her daughter. She's divorced from her daughter's father. He like lives all the way in California. She lives in New York. Anyways, on the surface, it seems like they have worked through a lot of these issues, but you don't really get any of that on the page, so it just doesn't feel very authentic for me. And it just felt like they never tried to like talk about all of these really heavy things that happen to them as children, like when they meet up as adults. There just was not enough like emotional depth to these like really big heavy themes happening. I don't really know how to explain it without spoiling too much, but I just couldn't buy into the romance. It wasn't working for me. That's the biggest complaint I had with this book. I have a lot of other smaller complaints that I can go through very quickly. I don't want to bash too much on this book. Really felt like the author was just throwing a lot at the wall to see what would stick. Like you have, well, first of all, the main character suffers from like chronic, like debilitating migraines. I think that was one of the issues that was best covered in the book, and I saw that the author herself also struggles with this, so that is probably why it felt the most authentic, like thing that she talked about. But they also touch on like the whitewashing in Hollywood, sex work, child abuse, the prison system, self-harm, foster care, and the list kind of goes on and on. Like there's just a lot happening in this book. And I think one of the most interesting plot lines was that Eva, the female main character, she writes these like erotica books, right? But what she really wants to do, like her passion project, is she wants to go down to Louisiana and research her like family lineage and write a book based on that. And you just kind of hear her say that she wants to do this like offhand a couple of times, and then it's never actually like explored as a plot point until we get to an epilogue, a really long epilogue at that, that kind of goes into this like passion project of hers. So it just felt very rushed and unfulfilling. But overall, I have more things. Like all the pop culture references were really grating. It felt very cringy, very millennial. I'm a millennial. I was like very much cringing at this book. Like really unnecessarily in-depth like descriptions of the clothes that people were wearing and the brand names that they were wearing. And also the book like wanted you to believe like these two characters, right? They're big like name authors. Like they're in the literary space. They're going to like these literary awards and stuff. And the book wants you to believe that they are being like recognized on the street and people are taking pictures of them and posting them on Twitter, and like it's blowing up and going viral. And like I would not recognize any of my favorite authors if I walked by them on the street. Maybe I'm the weird one, but I just feel like that's not happening, right? Like we're not like there's not paparazzi following famous authors around, right? I don't know. And like, you know, speculating on their love lives and stuff. I don't know. That was just so weird to me. I don't know. Overall, I just felt really disappointed by this book. I feel like there was so much potential for this to be a really, really powerful book, and then to take all of these really heavy, big topics and just slap them into a romance book without a lot of like care for all of these topics, to like let them breathe and let them like really like have a chance to say something meaningful. I don't know. It just really fell short. It really disappointed me, and I'm really sad to say that. And I'm sorry if this is a favorite book of yours and I just dumped on it for like 5 minutes. It is what it is. It just wasn't the book for me. All right, next up we have Run by Ann Patchett. I listened to this one on audio and I enjoyed it. It was pretty good. I know that this is not the book that she is like most well known for, so I would like to read some of her more popular books after reading this one. It was an interesting premise. Basically, you have a family, I think it's Boston, I think they live in Boston, and the father was like the mayor of the city. The mother died while her children were young. That's not a spoiler, it happens right at the beginning of the book. And they had an older son, and then struggled with infertility after they had this first son. His name is Sullivan. And so they ended up adopting a baby, a black baby. And after bringing him into their home, the biological mother was like, hey, I also have a 14-month-old son. Would you like to like keep them together and take both of them? And they were like, yeah. And so they adopted these 2 black boys and raised them. Like I said, she died while they were still young, and the father wants them to like follow in his footsteps because like to be a politician like he was. The older son, he's kind of like a deadbeat. He's like not really in the picture very much. And so he's like, it's up to you guys, my 2 younger sons. And they're not interested. So, but he's always trying to get them to go to like these political speeches and rallies and talks and stuff. So that's kind of like where we get dropped into the story. The 2 sons are meeting their father for a political like figure, like he's having a speech or a Q&A or something. Anyways, a snowstorm blows through. They're leaving this meeting. They're arguing with each other about something. The older of the 2 boys, his name is Tip, doesn't see a car coming right for him, and a random lady pushes him out of the way and takes like on the full impact of the car. And so he like breaks his ankle, but she like has to go to the hospital, like in an ambulance. She needs surgery. It's a serious injury. And her young daughter, I think she's like 11 or 12 years old, is with her. And it's a black woman and a black little girl, and no one really knows what to do with this little girl. And she's like, you guys can take me like to the other family. And they're like, okay. Anyways, so they end up finding out just how connected they are to this family. And it kind of like calls a lot into question about their identities, and I think it's really trying to say something about like interracial adoption, but I'm not sure what, if anything. I don't really know. It was an interesting story. There was a lot of really beautiful writing, some really beautiful prose. But I left the book feeling a little bit confused about what the author wanted me to take away from the book. And maybe that was the point. I feel kind of middle of the road about it. I think I gave it like 3 or 3.5 stars. Not the best book ever. I want to read more by the author. I liked her writing. I just think maybe this subject matter was a little bit off-putting for me. I do have like a history of interracial adoption in my own family. I don't know if that was like why I kind of felt unsure like what the author was getting at with choosing this particular subject matter. But yeah, I will read more by this author, I think, in the future, because I feel like she has work out there that is more like highly regarded than this one is. But yeah, that's Run by Ann Patchett. All right, next up we have Margot's Got Money Troubles by Rufi Thorpe. I listened to this on audio, and I picked this one up because I saw that they were doing an Apple TV show like based on this book, and Elle Fanning is the main actress that's playing Margot, and she reads the audiobook, so that was really cool. And I will say she did a really great job with the narration. But I liked this book. I didn't love it. I'm hoping that the TV show will be really good and really interesting. I still really want to watch the TV show. And I did see somewhere, I don't know if this is true, I did not fact check this, but I saw somewhere that the book was picked up for the TV show before she had actually finished it and sent it to be published. And the back half of that book, like, that makes sense. It felt kind of rushed, or like maybe she didn't spend as much time on the last like 25 to 50% of the book. There were some things that she like kind of set up at the beginning that never really got fully fleshed out, and I think the ending was kind of just like, let's just tie this up in a bow real quick. If you don't know what this is about, essentially this young girl, college-age girl, she gets into a relationship with one of her professors. She ends up getting pregnant. She decides to keep the baby against everyone's advice, and then after she has the baby, she realizes, oh, childcare is really expensive. How am I supposed to keep a job and afford childcare and do all of this on my own with a newborn and roommates? And like, you know, she just realizes very quickly that she got way in over her head. And then one day, her kind of estranged father, who is an ex-pro wrestler, shows up at her door and like moves in with her, and they kind of figure out together how to make it work and to make money. And I don't think this is a spoiler. I think this is kind of the premise of the book, but she ends up making an OnlyFans account, and that is how she ends up supporting herself. So there's some interesting things going on talking about like sex work and like young mothers and things like that. I'm hoping the TV show will do more and go more in depth with some of those themes. I think it could be really interesting. But Margot is a very quirky character. I enjoyed being in her head. I enjoyed like her thought process. But like I said, I just feel like the last half of the book really like fell off for me. I'm excited to watch the show. We'll see how that is. That was Margot's Got Money Troubles. All right, last up for February, we have Fly Away by Kathleen Jennings, right? Yeah, Kathleen Jennings. So this book I listened to on audio, and I am not even sure if I want to talk about it for this video because I feel like I didn't give this book a fair chance. I tried to hurry and finish this right at the end of the month because it fit in for the Read Good prompt for February, which was to read a book by an Australian author. And this had been on my TBR and I did want to read it, but I feel like I wasn't in the mood to read it when I did pick it up, and I kind of just forced myself through it. And so for those reasons, like I just really couldn't connect with the story. And I think it's definitely a me problem, not a book problem. Like I want to be upfront about that. Like I am unsure if I even am going to rate it. And honestly, I saw some people that don't always read the prompt book in the month that it's for. So I'm thinking I might even go back and read a different book by a different Australian author to replace it for the challenge. But anyways, this book is like kind of a gothic Australian outback fantasy surreal novella. It definitely like goes into a lot of like really folklore elements, and I think I just had a really hard time connecting with it like on audio. Like visualizing what was happening was really difficult for me, because it's a little bit surreal. It's a little bit like folky fairy tale vibe, but we follow our main character trying to unravel like a mystery of her father and her brother's disappearance. And she gets back together with some old friends of hers, and she kind of like rediscovers some things that happened in her past, through like this kind of like road trip that they go on through like the Australian outback. Like it's a little bit weird, it's a little bit unsettling, it's very interesting, but again, I think I just forced myself to read this book when I wasn't in the mood for it. So for those reasons, I feel like I can't really give it a fair rating and review, but I did want to mention it because I feel like a lot of people would really, really love this book if it seems like something that you would be interested in. So I wanted to just at least mention it in this video. That's Fly Away by Kathleen Jennings. All right, so now moving on to March, the first book that I finished was An American Marriage by Tayari Jones. This book was for the TBR Spin February prompt for Freshly Read Books. I started in February, but I didn't finish it until early March. Anyways, this book follows a young married couple, Celestial and Roy. They live in Atlanta and they are newlyweds. They've been married for a year and a half or so, and they are visiting Roy's parents in Louisiana. They're staying in a hotel when in the middle of the night they are dragged out by police, and Roy is arrested for a crime that he is innocent of, or they're claiming he's innocent of, right? And so then that's kind of the jumping off point of the novel. And then you get a big section right at the beginning where they're writing letters back and forth during all his years in prison, and you kind of just get this exploration of what this situation does to this couple and to their marriage. And I will say, like, at the beginning, it did seem like they had kind of a tumultuous relationship to start off with. It seemed like they had that kind of dynamic of a young couple that likes to fight and then make up and then fight and then make up and kind of like stay in that cycle, just like a very immature relationship. And so obviously this situation of being falsely accused and imprisoned has really rocked their world. And you go back and forth with Roy and Celestial's perspective, and also Celestial's like childhood best friend Andre is in the picture as well. And so those are kind of the three perspectives that you're getting. You're like shifting between all of their points of view. But that's all I'll say about the plot, because I don't want to spoil anything that happens in the story. But for me, this book was good. I feel like it could have been better. It really frustrated me, not the book, but the characters. Like, I just wanted to grab them and just shake them. I think that based on what I've seen people say about other books from this author, that I would like her other books a lot more than this one. This one, the characters really frustrated me to a point that it almost made the book like not enjoyable to read. And I don't need my characters to be likable. Like, I'm perfectly fine and happy most times with unlikable characters, but something about these people just really rubbed me the wrong way. I can't put my finger on it or really explain without spoiling the book, but the writing was great. I feel like the only complaint I have with the writing itself is that she's a little heavy-handed with her metaphor usage. There's a lot of metaphors, like a lot of metaphors. Like, I might even try to like take some screenshots and put some on the screen to just like kind of give you a vibe of what I mean, because it's hard to explain, but there's a lot of metaphors. But overall, I enjoyed the book. I enjoyed her writing. I think that she has a lot of strong potential for like really character-driven stories and like very, I know that a lot of her books are very like family-oriented, like sisters, friends, mothers, like all those kinds of things. So I'm interested in continuing down her backlist, and I actually have, right here, her new release was my book of the month pick last month, February or March, I can't remember, March. And this one sounds really, really good, and I've seen a lot of really great reviews from people that I really trust their opinions on books. So I feel like I have hope that anything that I read, I'm just gonna like more and more as I go more into her work. But there were things that I really loved about An American Marriage, and there were things that just didn't really connect with me, and I think it's hard to explain again without spoiling the book, but I'm excited to continue with her work and hopefully enjoy her other books even more. All right, next up in March, we have The Correspondent by Virginia Evans. I listened to this on audio, and I highly, highly recommend the audiobook for this book. It has a lot of really fun narrators, like narrating all the different characters. And if you're not familiar, because this book was longlisted for the Women's Prize for Fiction this year, but it is a book told entirely through letters. The main character, Sybil, she has written letters her entire life. It's like her thing. And so we're getting dropped into, I think she's in her 70s in this book, like the early 2000s. It takes place over like, I want to say like 10 or 15 years. I don't remember exactly. But you kind of get dropped into this point in her life. Your only perspective is through the letters that she's writing and receiving. She writes random letters to authors that she loves. Like if she finishes a book that she loves, she writes the author, and sometimes they write back, which is really interesting. But I just found this book to be very delightful. I've seen people call it cozy, and I think that's just because like reading a series of letters kind of evokes that like cozy feeling, but there's some heavy themes in this book. Like it's definitely not just all lighthearted and fun. Sybil is a very fun character. She's kind of like curmudgeonly, but like heart of gold, that type of like archetype. But if you read this book, I do highly recommend doing it on audio. The audiobook was absolutely fantastic. But yeah, I really enjoyed this one. I can definitely see why it got put on the long list for Women's Prize. I think it has a really good mass appeal, and it has a lot of really interesting themes, and it was just a really sweet story. I really enjoyed it. Next up, we have a series that has taken over my life, my heart, my everything, The Unselected Journals of Emma M. Lyon. I read the first 5 volumes via audiobook in March. There are 8 volumes total, and I know the author plans to come out with like 20 or 30 volumes. She talks about it on her website if you're interested in looking that up. But this series is exactly what it sounds like. It's told all through journal entries of Emma M. Lyon, our main character. and it's set in 1883 in London in her neighborhood. St. Crispian's is where she's from, and her family home, Lapis Lazuli House, she is set to inherit in like a year from when the first volume starts. She is just about to come of age. So she comes back to the house and realizes that in her absence, her elderly cousin Archibald has basically squandered her inheritance. He's run up a bunch of debts, he's not taking care of things, like all out of spite. He does not like Emma. And so she is now having to figure out, as a young single woman with no prospects, like she's not engaged, she is not planning on getting married, how she is going to support herself and support her home and inherit this home within the next like year. And so that's kind of where we start with the series, and then we go from there, and you start to meet all of these characters in the neighborhood, in the town, that are all just so quirky. The town has all of these like traditions and parties and things. They're all just like so silly and fun. I saw someone compare it to like I don't know what era this would be, like Regency era. Excuse my ignorance, but like whatever era version of Gilmore Girls, like the town that they live in Gilmore Girls, how like quirky and funny everyone is, and like how the town has like its own, the town itself is kind of a character in that show. It's kind of the same thing in this book series. But just, I've seen a lot of people talk about this. I think it's starting to really gain popularity, and it is definitely worth the hype. This series is amazing. It's so sweet. It's so heartwarming. There is depth to it. The audiobooks are fantastic. The narrator does an amazing job and really brings all the characters to life. I highly, highly recommend this series. And I would have already finished all 8 books if the whole like time wasn't so long on Libby. I've never bought an audiobook, but I've heavily considered it for these books just because I want to keep reading so bad. They're so good. All right, next up we have On Mystic Lake by Kristen Hanna. This ended up being my TBR spin book for March because the prompt was to swap a book on your original list with another book by the same author, and the only book I had on my original list that I had multiple books from that author was Kristen Hanna. The original book I had was The Great Alone by her, and I'm gonna be honest, I chose this one of the several that I own by Kristen Hanna. I chose this one because it was the shortest one. But I enjoy Kristen Hanna as an author. That's why I had The Great Alone on my original list, because I've read The Women, I've read Nightingale, I've read The Four Winds, and I enjoyed all of those books immensely. And so I really want to work my way through like her backlist, maybe not everything, but most of her backlist. And this is one I had just laying on my shelves because it was like $1 at a thrift store. This one came out in 1999, so it's a pretty old release. And it's definitely more just like a contemporary fiction romance type of book rather than what she's more known for now, I think, which is historical fiction. But her books do often, if not always, include or center a romance in the plot line. So I would say her books kind of fall into the historical fiction romance category. If you're unfamiliar with Kristen Hanna, I don't know who out there is unfamiliar with Kristen Hanna. I think she's probably one of the most popular authors writing right now. But anyways, this was the book that I read for TBR Spin for March, and it was okay. I enjoyed it. It was very readable. It was very quick to get through, even though it's like 400 pages. I feel like I flew through it because it was just very easy to read. Basically, it follows our main character, Annie. Her, right at the beginning of the book, she sends her daughter off to college overseas, and her husband immediately admits to an affair that he's been having and asks for a divorce. And so she obviously is completely brokenhearted, completely caught off guard. she ends up going back to her hometown somewhere in the Pacific Northwest. It's like a small town in the Olympic Peninsula. It's where her dad still lives. She ends up running into an old high school friend, and him and his daughter still live there. His daughter's like 6 years old, and his wife, who was also a high school friend of hers, like they were kind of a friend group together, she has recently died by suicide. And so Annie kind of steps up to help her friend Nick out with caring for his daughter, who has recently been like expelled from school because of like behavior issues stemming from the grief that she's having over her mother's death. And he also is obviously grieving and is having a very hard time dealing with these circumstances. So she kind of steps in and like starts to take care of them and basically emotionally nurse them all back to health. And that's kind of where the story goes. You kind of see all of these relationships start to develop. There's kind of like a ticking time clock on her needing to go back home because her and her husband have not told their daughter about what is happening in their marriage, and they've chosen not to tell her until she comes back home to visit. So she knows she's going to have to leave Nick and his daughter and go back home at a certain point. And it's just kind of all up in the air, and it's just kind of like all messy relationship stuff, and that's where the book goes. And so it's pretty heavy, but it also felt very quick to get through and pretty predictable. I feel like this is a classic like beach read, vacation read type of book where it's something that is emotional but written in a way that you can just read it pretty fast and know what's going on the whole time. It doesn't take a lot of brain power. And I enjoy a book like that every once in a while, so I enjoyed it. I enjoy Kristin Hannah's writing. Obviously, I think she's grown a lot as an author since 1999, so I'm glad that I read this, but I think I will try to read more of her recent releases from here on out before I dive back into her older backlist. All right, next up we have Here One Moment by Liane Moriarty. I listened to this on audiobook at the recommendation of my husband. So he listened to the audiobook and really enjoyed it, told me I would like it, so I picked it up and listened to it, and I did really enjoy this book. I've never read a Liane Moriarty before. This was my first, but I really loved the audiobook. It's set in Australia. It's Australian. Is Liane Moriarty Australian? Can I count this as my March or as my February read good Australian author book? I might replace this on that challenge. Anyways, I digress. Here One Moment. The premise of this book, basically on this random domestic flight in Australia, this woman gets up in the middle of the flight and starts going passenger to passenger and telling them, I expect you will die by this cause at this age, to everybody on the plane. Everyone's super freaked out, obviously, like what is happening? And then they all get off the plane, they go about their lives. Someone from the plane dies in the way and at the age that she predicted. So everyone's, it's affecting everyone in a different way. You kind of get a couple of key characters from the plane and you go into their stories like before and after the flight. And then the Death Lady, as she is known after this event, you also get kind of her life story thrown in between these chapters. And the audiobook is great because there's two different narrators, one for the Death Lady's chapters and one narrator for everyone else's point of view. So I really enjoy when audiobooks have multiple narrators to kind of differentiate those points of view. But I really enjoyed this book. It had a lot of really interesting themes, obviously about death and about mortality and about how you never know what day is going to be your last. So do what you want to do with your life. Yeah, it was really good. It was very emotional. It was really good on audio. I definitely want to read more from this author. I think her writing was really good. I can see why she's such a popular author. So yeah, that's Here One Moment by Liane Moriarty. And last up for March, we have Kindred by Octavia E. Butler. Now, first of all, I loved this book. I gave it 5 stars. My second 5-star read of the year. So that's exciting. And also this will be in the vlog that I'm putting out soon, so I'm not going to go too in depth because I want to save my thoughts for that. This book was originally published in 1979, so I think maybe it could be considered a classic, or at least a modern classic at this point. But Octavia E. Butler, she's most well known for, I think, this book and also her Parable of the Sower series, which I've read the first one of that series, and I have to say I didn't love it as much as I thought I was gonna love it, so I was a little apprehensive about this book, but it way exceeded my expectations. I loved this book, and let me just say, it's heavy. It's heavy book. If you don't know what this book is about, essentially our main character, Dana, she's living in the 1970s in America, Black woman, married to a white man. All of the sudden, in the middle of unpacking, they just moved into a new house, she is transported back in time to the antebellum South, to a plantation as a Black woman. And she's all of a sudden in this situation where she's on the side of the road, on the side of like a river, and this very young white child is drowning in the river, and she goes in and rescues him and gives him CPR basically. And then all of a sudden she's like pulled out of the river. Everyone's like accusing her, like, what is this Black woman doing to this child? They don't know what CPR is. And his father points a gun in her face, and all of a sudden she's back in present day. So that's all happening in the first like chapter of the book. So that's your setup. And the rest of the book is her going back and forth between her present day and the antebellum South. And each time she starts to learn more about why she is being pulled back in time, and she seems to have no control over it. It's all connected to this young boy that she saved on her initial visit. And her husband is also brought with her at some point, brought back at some point, like they go back and forth a little bit. So that's kind of the premise of the book. We have time travel, we have historical fiction, we have like kind of a fictional slave account. And each time she's pulled back into the past, her stay becomes longer and more complicated. Her relationship with the white people of this plantation that she does have some type of connection with that I won't spoil, it just becomes very complex. And the way that Octavia E. Butler has written this book is so interesting. First of all, like the prose is so simple in a way that I felt like I was reading a thriller almost. Like I was just page turning. Like I flew through this book. Anytime I wasn't reading it, I was thinking about when the next time I could read it, because I was so worried about everyone and wanting to know what happened next. But at the same time, there's such depth to the themes and the things explored in this book. This is another book that is immediately on my list of books that I will reread in the future. I borrowed this through the library. I'm going to buy a copy. Yeah, it just really blew me away. I'm still thinking about it quite often and reading articles and reviews and critics' essays on it, because there's just so much that can be gotten from this book, while also being a very approachable book. So I feel like for those reasons, I think everyone should read it, especially everyone in America. Obviously, it deals with some really heavy themes specific to America, such as slavery and race relations and things like that. But yeah, I highly recommend. It was so good. And again, I'll talk about it more in depth in my vlog. But for now, just know you should read Kindred if you have not already. Highly recommend. All right, that's everything that I read in February and March. Now, for this portion of the video, if you're interested in knowing how all of these things fit into my biggest reading challenge you'll ever do, that's what I'm going to go through right now. So we're starting off. I'm just going to go through each prompt that got a book added to it within the last 2 months. And again, to remind you, I'm only adding books to this challenge that I physically read, so any audiobooks will not count towards this challenge. But first up, we're going to go through the A to Z challenge. I added On Mystic Lake for M, for Mystic, and then I added 7 Days in June for S for the A to Z challenge. And then next up, we have the Genre Challenge. It got its first book added to it for 7 Days in June for romance. And if you remember from the last video where I talked about this, I'm only using a book twice. It can only be used twice in the whole challenge. So 7 Days in June, that's it. I can't use it anywhere else. And I can't swap and change. Once I choose where a book goes, it stays there. All right, so 7 Days in June for romance for the Genre Challenge. And then we have the By the Hundreds prompt, which is referencing the page count of a book. I added Department of Speculation for the 100 to 199 page range. Short little book that really packs a punch there. And then next up, for BIPOC authors new to you, I added An American Marriage by Tayari Jones. The thought and intention behind this particular prompt is BIPOC authors that are new to me, obviously, but that I want to read more from. So that's why I chose to add it to this prompt, because I definitely want to read more from Tayari Jones after reading An American Marriage. And then next up, one of the challenges that I was most excited for, we have the Blurb Challenge. So just to remind you, the purpose of this prompt is to take a book and then go through the little author blurbs at the beginning or on the front or the back, where other authors are reviewing books, and take 3 of those and read a book from 3 different authors, if that makes sense. So the thought behind this challenge is, to me, I took this directly from Herkyed, the original Herkyed, but the thought behind this challenge for me is to read a book that I really enjoy, and I'm choosing Northwoods, which was 5 stars, and the thought is that authors that are similar in vibe or audience will be the ones that the publisher is choosing to have recommend the books. So hopefully I can find some new authors that I like through this challenge. All right, so that's Northwoods for the Blurb Challenge, and then I'll choose 3 different authors from that book later on. And then next challenge that got something added to it, we have banned books, and I'm adding Kindred to this one. And this has been banned. I specifically found an article talking about how it is often banned in prisons in particular, and obviously it's banned in schools and things like that. But I thought this was especially interesting. Often banned in prisons, and then this is a quote, PEN America found that literature on race and civil rights are disproportionately subject to bans in prisons, often on grounds that such materials threaten to disrupt the social order inside them. Yeah, so there's that. And then we also added one to award winners, because An American Marriage won the Women's Prize for Fiction in, I think, 2018 or maybe 2019. But yeah, so now we have 2 for that one. And then last is going to be a major spoiler for what my vlog is going to be about, but we have all 3 books filled out for my reading color recommendations: Department of Speculation, Northwoods, and Kindred. So if you want to know more about what that's all about, stay tuned for my vlog coming very soon, where I discuss these books in depth and what the Read Your Color quiz is. And yeah, I'm really excited for that one, so I hope that you guys will watch that when it comes out and enjoy that. All right, that's all I have for today. That's everything that I read in February and March. If you're still watching, thank you so much for being here. If you wouldn't mind giving this video a like, maybe even subscribing. I'm really enjoying coming on here and talking about books with y'all. So if you have any recommendations for me, I would love for you to leave those in the comment, or if you've read any of the books that I talked about today, I'd love to hear whether you agree or disagree with what I said about them, or just your thoughts in general. But yeah, until next time, let's chat in the comments, and I'll see you again soon. Bye.